Welcome back to the Practical Church Podcast. My name is Dylan Dotson, and today on the Practical Church Podcast, I'm going to share with you 5 common church website mistakes and how you can fix them, like literally today. Of course, as always, if you want more from me and the Practical Church Show, you can go to missionsupport.com/practical. You can sign up to the Practical Church newsletter. You can even submit questions to be answered in future episodes. And as always, the Practical Church Podcast is brought to you in partnership with Mission Support. So be sure to check them out at missionsupport.com. They come alongside pastors as a guide to provide you the expertise to do the things you don't know how to do and give you back the time you desperately need. And so things like SEO, payroll, websites, which we're talking about today, or any of their other services, head to missionsupport.com to talk to a pastor today, or talk to a guide today. It's great. It's possible to love being a pastor again, and Mission Support does a lot of behind-the-scenes details that often might stress pastors or church leaders like you and me out. So be sure to check them out. And for today's episode, let's go ahead and get into it. 5 common church websites mistakes. All right, 5 common church website mistakes. Now, some of these may seem more obvious than others, but they are ones that I see literally all the time. All the time. When I talk to church planners, I'm trying to learn what's going on, or if I see something going on, or to be honest, sometimes for the many churches at like Christmas and Easter and various other times where they're running social media ads and they don't geo-target or target geographically their Facebook ads or whatever. You know, I live in Raleigh, North Carolina, and so I'm getting ads from like Topeka, Kansas and California and Texas. And so sometimes I'll like click on these websites. I'm like, or these churches, I'm like, do they even know what they're doing here? And so I just look at a lot of church websites. And there are some very common things that I think it's hard for me to put a number on this. I would say the majority of church websites have at least one of these 5 mistakes on their website. And so I'm going to talk about what they are. And I would guarantee you to go and check and make sure that your church website's not doing the same thing. Okay. So here is number 1. Here's the first one. Hosting your sermon on your church website. So there's various services and that do this. I know like Subsplash, they do church websites. I think they have the option, and this is not like a call out against anybody that does this, but there are certain church website builders where you will, instead of hosting your sermon on like something like YouTube, which is what I would primarily recommend, and like embedding it into your website, it's actually hosted on your website. There's a couple of problems with that. One, YouTube, biggest search engine in the world, or maybe second to Google, but it's owned by Google. And so if your stuff is not on YouTube, it's a lot harder for people to find you. So that's a big problem. The second problem is if your church website, your website host, or maybe even host your own website, if you ever move your website to another host, whether it's a third party or, you just update stuff in-house, you will lose all that stuff, or you have to manually import all those videos, and videos are very big files and would take a ton of time. What you need to do, what I would highly recommend, is that you use something primarily YouTube, that you would put your sermons on YouTube, and then you would embed them into your church website. Now some websites do this manually, or you just copy it, or manually in the sense of like you upload the sermon to YouTube, and then you just copy and paste the link and you put it right in there. That's what I would recommend. And it does 2 things. 1, it gets you on YouTube. And 2, if you ever change your website provider or anything like that, like your sermons are already there. Now I know Vimeo is maybe the personal preference, is also an option. I've seen some churches who host their sermons on Vimeo and then put Vimeo in their website. I wouldn't recommend Vimeo because Vimeo isn't used nearly to the degree as YouTube, and it doesn't search nearly as well as YouTube. So my recommendation, put your sermons on YouTube and then take the YouTube embed code or the YouTube link and put that in your website. Do not host your sermon on your church website, because if anything ever changes with your church website, you will lose all that stuff. And it's also not searchable. You could say, well, I guess one option or one workaround is you could also do YouTube and then also host it in your church website as well. If you really want your church website to host it, you could do that. It's twice the work. But you could go that route, but I would put on YouTube, and I would not primarily leave them only on your website, because if anything happens to your church website, you're gonna lose all those videos, or you have to transfer them, and it will take forever. So host them on your website. Now, second thing to do with sermons, and it's the second post here, is here's a common mistake: posting your live stream on your website. like the live stream of your entire service on your website. Here's the reality, okay? If people are not watching live, they do not really care about anything but the sermon. They don't really care about anything but the sermon. They don't really care about watching the worship or watching the announcements or watching whatever. If they're on your website, especially if they're new people, which we're talking about in a second, and they want to hear a sermon, if you upload an entire, here's the problem. So number one, I'll put it this way. Unless they're watching it actually live, they don't want to watch all that other stuff. The second problem is you've now created friction because primarily people are looking at when they look for sermons on the website is just the sermon. In fact, a lot of websites will have a tab that says sermons, but then they post the whole service. It doesn't say service, it says sermons. So if your tab says sermons, but you're posting the whole service, it's technically not the right verbiage you should use. They're looking for sermons. And here's the problem with the old live stream. Now you're forcing people to have to click to try to find the beginning of your sermon. So you're adding some friction. And for new people, the more friction you add, the less they're going to care to actually try to figure out a solution. Now, this is a side note with that point. I also, by the way, would not recommend including your bumper video in your uploaded sermons. Because again, people watching online, they don't care about your bumper video. It could be 30 seconds, maybe a minute and a half. I don't know, depending on how long it is. And that's honestly kind of like wasted intro time, especially if they're searching on YouTube and they see like this bumper video before they actually see the actual content that they're interested in. So I wouldn't put the bumper video as well. I also would not, again, put the live stream. Here's what we do at New City. Here's what I would recommend to you. If you live stream, so for us at New City, we live stream on Facebook and on YouTube. Now we leave the live stream up. At any point, someone could watch the live stream of our service on YouTube if they really want to. Although if we look at our views, like nobody really watches the live stream after Sunday. Like nobody does. Everyone just watches the sermon. So we do that. And then we also upload the sermon separately, just the sermon. So we do the live stream, but we also record the sermon on the camera. So the best scenario is you live stream, you also record the sermon independently, and then you upload the sermon. The second best scenario is you just clip the live stream and put the live stream only, the live stream sermon only on your website. Or also on YouTube, like have a second channel. The problem with just clipping the live stream is the quality is not typically as good as just recording it straight from the camera, but that's the second best option. But a lot of cameras, you can go live and also record onto the camera as well, which is what we do. Like our sermon, part of our service, is the same camera is used for the live stream as the sermon, but we record to the camera and we use the camera recording to upload the sermon, and the live stream is on its own. So all that to say, you can upload your live stream and leave it, but I would not put it on your website. People are looking for sermons, and if they're not watching live, they don't really care about anything but the sermon, and you're now having to make them try to click through and find out when this sermon begins. This one's always fascinating to me because I like a lot of church websites. I've seen a number of like large churches where if you go to click on their sermons, all you get is the live stream. And even if their audio quality is great and all that sort of thing, like nobody really cares. Nobody really cares. They're looking for the sermon. So make sure, if you are live streaming, that on your church website, on the sermons page, or on the homepage of your website, if you scroll down a bit and you have like your latest sermon, please make sure that it is just the sermon and not the live stream. You're adding extra friction if people have to kind of try to click through and find out where it is. Also, these are just small things, but if somebody sees a video that's like over an hour long and they assume it's just going to be the sermon, well, they're probably not even going to click play because they're like, well, that's like a 90-minute sermon. I don't really want to listen to that. So a live stream is great, but on your website, it should only be the sermon because that is what people are actually looking for. So if you have live stream only, maybe this Sunday going forward, make sure you record just the sermon or at least clip just the sermon. You can have the live stream on YouTube, but on your website, just keep it towards the sermon because that's what people are looking for. Number 3. Church websites that don't have the 3 most sought after things on your homepage. So it's an important reminder, the number one demographic of person who visits your church website are new people, are new guests interested in your church. Even if you have like church signups for things, like people in your own church have to go to the website to sign up for something, they'll do that. But the amount of people that visit your website to sign up for something is still smaller than the amount of new people who are checking out your website. And so what can happen if you're not careful is that your church website can be designed for your church people, but not for the primary audience of people who are looking at your website, which are new people. And so if new people are the number one type of person who's going to visit your website, they want to learn where you are, information about the church, staff, all these sorts of things, you've got to make the information that they want easy to find. It's kind of like the live stream thing, right? So if you upload a live stream, the whole service, instead of just a sermon, you're making it more difficult for people to find or to start on or watch just the sermon. If you have new people coming to your church or new people interested in church, what do you think they want to know? Well, they want to know what time you meet. They want to know where you meet, and they want to know what to expect when they get there. Where you meet, when you meet, and what to expect when you get there. And so my recommendation is at the top of your homepage, like with minimal scrolling necessary, that you say, this is the place and address that we meet. So again, if you meet at a high school and you just say, Ashley High School. Again, if I'm in your city, but I don't know where that high school is, that is not helpful for me. You have to give the high school and the address. So if you meet in a school, for example, I would say the name of the school and the address. If you meet in a building, then you can just have the address of the building. Even if it's like a well-known part of town or maybe in a well-known shopping center or anything like that, you still want to have the physical address so people can type into their phones and know exactly where to go. So a lot of times I'll see like unclear where they meet, they'll mention the school or they'll mention the city and there won't be an address. Here's the thing, you need, when I say address, you need the like 123 Main Street and the city. So 123 Main Street, Raleigh, or wherever you are, because again, 123 Main Street, well, it could be a popular name. Or you could have people who are like right outside the city and don't know where these things are. So you need the street address and the city so it is crystal clear where people can go to find you. Again, that needs to be up on the top of your website. It can't just say again, we're in Raleigh, a church in Raleigh. Where in Raleigh? If I'm new, I shouldn't have to be clicking around on the tabs to find out where I'm supposed to go. The second thing that should be very clear is your service times. Like what time do you actually meet? If you just say we meet on Sundays, that's not really helpful. So now people, again, they're having to go the extra step themselves to try to find out what time am I actually supposed to be there. Now, I'm not saying our website's the best, but if you go to newcdrd.com, you can see like right at the top, we've got our service time and we've got our address. Like that's where it's got to be super simple. And the third thing I'd recommend is something that says like, I'm new or plan a visit. Like a little button at the very top that says I'm new or plan a visit, where people can click that's like, oh, again, it's helpful because it's like, oh, they expected me. Like they thought I was going to be here. And then they click on it, it has all the information. Now, again, I'm not saying ours is the best, but you can go to newcdrd.com, our website, and just like, if you want to copy and paste all of it, go for it. Or copy and paste everything that's helpful and tweak what's helpful for you. So we'll say like, am I expected to give? What time should I arrive? What do I do with kids? What's the service going to be like? Even if they don't like read all of the questions and answers you might have on this page, what it tells people is we expect people like you to visit our church. We don't expect you to know everything. We expect you to be maybe a little nervous. We expect you to be maybe a little confused, a little unsure of what to do. And so we provide that. And so these things, again, they also need to be at the top of your website. It does not need to be things that are like, sign up for this event, especially if it's outdated, or like information about the church. That stuff is fine. But on the homepage, if the number one group of people who are visiting your church website are new people, then you want to make that like least friction as possible to get the information they most desperately want, which again is what to expect, when do you meet, and where do you meet. So I would just say this. Well, I think it's on our website. If I were you, I would check my church website to make sure our address is crystal clear, not just like the area of town or the building that we're in, but like the actual address. Make sure our service time is crystal clear, like it's easy to read. And make sure there's a page that says, hey, I'm new, or plan a visit, or we expect people for like you to have questions to come. The number one type of people who are going to visit your church website are new people. And so I would just say, man, if you're struggling with maybe the number of new people coming to your church, if you're missing any of those three things on your website, that could be a big reason why. And also, here's the thing, man, not having these things also communicates like we don't really expect new people to come. Like we expect if you to come to our church, for you to have done the homework, or for you to search the website, or for you to actually really want to be here. It's also hard too, man, if you think about it this way, like you want people at your church to invite their friends. Well, then we as church leaders, man, we got to make it as easy as possible for them to invite their friends. So if their friend invites them, let's say you even have invite cards or whatever. You got a church website, they tell them about the church website, or they find you on social media, or maybe your friend, somebody at your church like reshares one of your posts and they're interested. And they go to their website and now they have to like ask their friends, so like, what time is it at? Or like, where do they meet? It's just extra friction. It might seem small to you and me, but it's not necessarily small for someone who's really nervous about the stuff and does not know what to expect. So again, what time you meet, be very clear. where you meet, like actual specific address, street name and city, and some sort of I'm new or plan your visit so people know exactly what to expect when they come. Here's the fourth one, outdated events and sermons. It's a big mistake. Let's talk events first. Sometimes, if it's Christmas or Easter, maybe you got a big, trunk or treat event or something that your church does every year, and it's like on the homepage of your website and it's over and it's past. Sometimes like a couple of weeks, sometimes like a couple of months, and it's still on your website. That does not look good. Again, if new people are the number one type of people who go to your church website and they see stuff that is outdated, they're going to think, like, do they even care? Do they know what's going on? Do they expect people like me to be trying to find information? And so there's different website providers can do this in different ways. Maybe set events to expire, or maybe just set reminders for maybe it's you, whoever's in charge of your website. Hey, it's the next day after this event, make sure we take it down. You got to do stuff like that so that it's updated all times. It always looks bad. And it comes across as this is a small detail on your website that's very obvious. If you don't care about this, what other things are you not paying attention to? So outdated events, when the events are done, you got to make sure they are gone and off your website, especially the big ones like Christmas Eve services, right? It's the second week of January and they're still there. It's kind of like, did you stop meeting on Christmas Eve? So make sure your events are updated and off the website or updated when the next one is coming up. The second thing is sermons. So this is something I see. In fact, I was looking at a website a couple days ago and I saw this again. They hadn't updated any sermons on their website, of their church's website, for 3 months. Now their YouTube channel was being updated every week, but their church website has not been. Now that's great for YouTube if somebody's looking for some stuff, but if they're on your church website and they're looking for things and they click on sermons and they haven't seen updated sermons in 3 months, especially when you were somewhat consistent beforehand, people are going to think, are they still preaching? Do they still have sermons going on? And again, it doesn't look good. I know I keep saying this, but the number one demographic is new people. And so I just don't think we can get frustrated at the lack of new people if the biggest front door, your website, is not updated for new people. I don't know about you, but I would never go to a church without checking out their website first. Even if I found them on social media or whatever, I would still go to their website. Always, always, always before I go to the church. And if I see sermons that are outdated, it's been 3 months, that's kind of weird. If I see events that are outdated, it's been 3 or 4 months, again, that's kind of weird. That automatically puts me off before I even come to the church for the first time. Or I might honestly just think, well, I'm going to go to a church that actually seems to care about these things. So is there anything outdated on your website? It's a really, really big deal. You need to be setting reminders. If the website doesn't automatically take things down, you need to be set reminders. Hey, update the website. In fact, if I were you, I would probably depending on the size of your church and who's in charge, just to be safe, I've already set a reminder every Sunday afternoon or every Monday or every Tuesday, whatever. One day every single week, you have this reminder. I use Todoist as my preferred task manager, however you want to do it, to check the church website, check the homepage, check the events, check the sermons, make sure everything is updated because it communicates to new people. We don't expect you to check our website if things are outdated. So outdated sermons, outdated events, those are big things I see more often than I would think. And last but not least, number 5, a lack of pictures of your church or from your church on your church website. So again, this is it's stock images are a big no-no. They're a big no-no, especially in our day and age today where pictures are so easy to get. Even if you even hired a photographer just for one Sunday, you can get a handful of pictures that could last you a while. And so you need to have pictures of when I say church, I don't mean your church building. I mean people at your church. What does it look like if I come to your church? And can I just say, what I see sometimes too, especially if it's a smaller church, and I understand, but if it's a smaller church, I'll see a lot of pictures of the stage or people on the stage, and there'll be no pictures of the lobby. There'll be no pictures in the auditorium. There'll be it's kind of man, does anybody go there? And I get I'm not saying you need to put an empty picture of your auditorium with only a handful of people on your website. But you can, get pictures before and after the service of people standing, people smiling, actual real pictures of your church, of your building. It's really, really helpful. And of course, live stream helps a little bit because you can at least see some of the stage. But it's really helpful, especially if you're really anxious and you go to a church website and you can kind of see a little bit of what to expect. Maybe it's a little bit of a pro tip. Taking pictures of your kid space. When your kid drop your kids off, here's the room for babies and toddlers and pre-K and kindergarten or elementary, whatever your rooms look like. I would even recommend that. Taking pictures of the space that parents are going to drop their kids off. Again, it shows parents, hey, we've thought about you, especially if they've never been to church before. Listen, never been to church before, and all you ever hear about church on the news is like the bad stuff or is like the child abuse stuff. You're gonna be very, very nervous to drop your kids off at church. But at least some of these things like, hey, I'm new. Hey, here's a dedicated page on our website to what to expect when you drop off your kids. Here's a picture of where your kids are gonna be staying. That helps like parents at ease a lot. And so a lack of pictures from your church, from your gatherings on Sundays on your website is a big missed opportunity. It doesn't need to be like big crowds of people. It could just be like a couple people here standing in the lobby, a couple people outside in the parking lot, like just like various things of people at your church smiling, like real people that actually go to your church so people can get a feel what it looks like. And so again, those are 5 common website mistakes. If you are hitting like 100% not doing any of these things, that's awesome. My experience is like the vast majority of churches are doing at least one, if not many of these. So let me just recap it again. Here's the 5 common website mistakes. Hosting your sermon on your church website and not on YouTube. Number 2, posting your entire live stream to your website instead of just the sermon. Number 3, not posting the 3 most sought after things on the homepage of your website. Where you meet, location, city, and street, what time or times you meet, and a button that says I'm new or plan a visit. That's really easy to see. Those 3 things can be missed. Number 4, having outdated events or sermons on your website. And then number 5, a lack of pictures from your church. These are easy things to correct, things you literally could do this week, unless you need pictures. You can take pictures this Sunday, update your website. Even if they're not the most amazing pictures, at least have something and go from there. That will help you attract new people, show them that you expect them, and welcome them when they come. Those are 5 common website mistakes. Here's my observation for this episode, and this might be a little bit more of a reflection, but it has to do with really what to do when people leave, and especially if they're upset when they leave your church. So I'm not talking about people who move away and like wish they didn't have to, but like people who are still in your town, angry for whatever reason, they decide to leave your church. Here's the best thing you can do, okay? Offer to meet with them if they want to meet. Listen to why they're frustrated. Apologize for what they're frustrated about and own what you can. This is my recommendation. Now, some people leave, they're angry, whatever. But, New City's been around for over 7 years now. And if you've been around for any length of time, you'll have times where people are really upset about something. And let's be honest, sometimes it's unfair. Sometimes it's kind of unfounded. Sometimes it's like, man, if this is what upsetting you, then maybe this is not the best fit. Regardless, here's the best thing you could do. If they want to chat, you can meet with them, listen to their concerns, their frustrations, regardless of how, I don't know, legitimate's probably not a fair word, but let's just go with that. Legitimate their frustrations are, people feel how they feel. They feel how they feel. And so it's okay to like understand or empathize with how they're feeling. Even if you feel like it's unfair or you're like, man, I'm not sure how you got there, but how you feel, you can empathize or you can at least listen. You can apologize. And I know this is hard because sometimes it's like, well, you're upset about X, but the reason X happened is because Y and Z happened. What I have found what's best to do is just to say, hey, listen, I'm sorry. I'm sorry that this didn't go the way you expected. Or if there are legitimate things that you should apologize for, just say, hey, I'm sorry that this is what happened. Or I'm sorry that expectations were not met. And then own what you can. Whatever kernel of truth is there, even if it wasn't like specifically you the one that did it, maybe it was another staff member, another church member or whatever, own what you can. What I would not recommend is then you start to say, well, here is why we made this decisions, or here is why we've done this, or here is why it's really unfair for you to say this. Or maybe put another way, the goal in this kind of like exit meetings, if you will, is not to argue. It's not to correct where they were wrong, even if they're wrong in a lot of spaces, and nor is it about sharing how you feel. Because at this point, to be honest, how you feel probably really does not matter to this person. So I'm not saying you can never say like, well, here's why we made these decisions, because especially if it's a very unfair and very critical conversation, I do think it's okay to say, well, calmly, well, here's why we did this. I wouldn't go back and forth a ton, but I would like say, well, here's our thoughts behind it. And it's okay that they're upset. I found if you at least like hear people out, it's okay. So I've had, a handful of these conversations over the years. Sometimes felt very like they were very unfair, or they were upset about decisions that were made, where it's like, well, I think it's pretty obvious we made this decision, or here's why. But at that point, it was not helpful. It's always the best to just offer to meet if somebody wants to meet, listen, apologize, and own what you can. Kind of going back and forth and saying, well, here's why we did this and here's why I think you're wrong is not helpful. Now, is it unfair to you? Yes. There are many times where it is unfair, but let's be honest, man. If we're pastors, if we're ministry leaders, if we're in vocational ministry, it's part of what we signed up for. There's a lot of amazing things about being in ministry, and there's some hard things. And sometimes some of the hard things are letting people be mad at you and angry at you, even if it feels like it's unfair. So all that to say, best thing you can do is offer to meet, listen, apologize, own what you can. If you're coming into this meeting saying, well, I'm going to correct, well, here's why we did all these things, well, I can't believe you, it's only going to get worse. And honestly, at this point, there's very little you can say to make them probably happy anyway, or content anyway. So own what you can, apologize where you can, and let the conversation go. That's my recommendation of what to do when you find yourself in those situations. Well, here's today's productivity tip for this episode. Let me share with you how to save massive time on projects that you're working on. If you have somewhat of a large project or task that you do on a consistent basis, i.e. sermon prep, if that's you, but there could be anything. If there's a massive project or task that you have on a somewhat consistent basis, then you need to give yourself time restraints on when you allow yourself to work on it and when it has to be done by. So here are the time or the times that I'm going to work on it. And then here is the deadline that it's going to be done by. So for example, as a pastor, many of you listening to this can relate. I write a sermon almost every week. And instead of working on it until it is finished, whatever that really means, I hear a lot of pastors say that. Typically, the preachers that I hear say that often spend way too much time on their sermons as well. So working on it until it's finished, it's undefined and kind of gives you the reason to keep taking much time. Instead of doing that, what I would recommend is I have set times in my calendar when I'm working on my sermon. I work on my sermon at these times and then I'm done. What I've actually found is that when my allotted time is up, I'm done. I'm actually pretty much always done, especially because I've been doing this for a while. It's Parkinson's Law. I'm not sure if you're familiar with it. Maybe I've mentioned it a couple times on this podcast. Basically, Parkinson's Law says that any task, project, or anything you have to do will always fill to the amount of time that you give it. If you give yourself 20 hours for sermon prep, which in my opinion, in today's day and age with all the tools that we have, way too much time. I would argue that most of us, unless you're brand new to preaching, your sermon will be no better. In fact, it'll probably be a little bit less effective if you spend 20 hours as opposed to 12 hours. Maybe even 10 hours. Now you might be saying there's no way I could do that. Well, part of that is because you haven't maybe had constraints of here's when I do my time and here's when I don't. Here's the thing. Since I know that I'm giving myself a certain amount of time, I actually stay focused during my sermon writing time and I don't do other things that might distract me. There's no checking email. There's no social media. There's no phone calls. There's no, hey, I'm going to do this for a little bit and I'm going to check out and relax for a little bit. No, my time is I'm going to work at this time, then I'm going to be done with it. The end result was I typically finish before my allotted time because I stayed on task knowing a predetermined end time is coming. So if you're working on something that is never really done, like sermons, decide when you are going to be done ahead of time. When you do so, you are a lot more likely to actually be done in a reasonable amount of time. So set, here are the times that I work on my sermon, and here is my deadline. I'm done no matter what by this time. There can be exceptions to this if needed. I have found over the years that those exceptions are very rarely needed because I'm focused when I'm focused, and when I'm off, I'm off. Well, today's ministry question comes from the Practical Church Facebook group. Someone posted, does anyone use a time tracking app for hourly employees? What do you like about it? Now, I'm not going to really fully answer this question. I'm going to share maybe an opinion. Here's a messy opinion. At the end of the day, especially in the day and age in which we live, you're really hiring for results, not hours. You're hiring for results, not hours. Now I get we need to allot, if you're part-time staff or whatever, I understand we need to allot a certain amount of hours for a task. If you want, Cal Newport, his latest book, Slow Productivity, but even Deep Work, all of his stuff, he even has a podcast. He talks a lot about knowledge work today. Part of the problem is in the industrial age, when you're making everyone's making trinkets, or a lot of people are, it's really easy to say, I'm going to pay you per hour because this is the amount of things I expect you to produce. In knowledge work, sermon writing, and people business, like in ministry, you can't always quantify a number of trinkets for hours worked. And so what we often do in the modern workforce is that we say you have to work for 40 hours a week because that's how we did it in the industrial age. even though that those are kind of apples to orange comparisons. Now, why am I saying all this? I think like at New City, here's what we do. We've got a handful of part-time staff. Of course, me full-time. We basically kind of go by the thing of like, here's about how many hours we expect you to work per week. We don't ask our, and maybe this is a trust thing. We don't really ask anyone to track their hours. Like nobody submits an hour like sheet every week. Now we'll have staff from time to time to track their own hours, and we'll ask them to do that to say, hey, I want to make sure that like over a couple week period, you're not overworking. So like the only reason we would ask someone to track hours at New City is to make sure they weren't working too much. We don't actually ask any of our employees to track their hours, part-time employees to track their hours to ensure they're working enough, because we're hiring them for a result. And if the results are lacking, or if things are not in place, then that's going to be a problem. And part of it is too, like I do a monthly one-on-one meeting with all of our staff. We go over goals, agendas, stuff like that. And I get our staff is smaller, so maybe in a bigger organization, this is a little bit different. Although the person who asked this is leading a church plant, so it's not a big church. Or sorry, it doesn't have a ton of staff. I get it. So maybe it's not a helpful thing, but at the end of the day, remember, you're hiring for results, not necessarily hours. So I get you need to correlate hours per se. I'm not saying you shouldn't track hours. But I do think you should have employees that you trust. And some hours are easy to track than others. Like if you're an administrative assistant, that's a lot easier. If you're like a worship director or someone like that, maybe that's a little bit harder, because it's not just like how many hours were you practicing and scheduling. There's a lot of, if you're a pastor, I mean, there's some things that are just hard to kind of quantify, if that makes sense. So it's not just about hours worked for us at New City. It's about the results that you're producing and what we're actually hiring you to do. So we do hire for a certain amount of hours a week, but we don't track on any sort of app, because that's not what our focus is. Our focus is on like a result or like an area of ministry. That's what we're hiring you to focus on. So that actually might be less helpful, at least practically, than answering the question. But I just want to give you maybe a reframe on how to view staff hours, part-time hours, and how to track how much people are working on staff. Well, as always, thanks so much for checking out the Practical Church podcast. If you're listening to this on a podcast, we're also on YouTube, Practical Church. And of course, if you're watching this on YouTube, you can find us wherever you find your podcasts. If you want to submit a question for a future episode, or maybe a topic for a future episode, missionsupport.com/practical. That's where you can do so. And if you want help to help you love being a pastor again, if you got some background administrative tasks, websites, SEO, bookkeeping, some of these hard tasks that you need some help on, check out missionsupport.com. They're helping a number of churches all across the United States. And so make sure you check them out to get more support to help you love being a pastor again. And I'll be back with you in 2 weeks for the next episode of the Practical Church podcast.